Hi, this is Paul Chapman from Derby Community Acupuncture, also Chinese medicine online for those who are not in the northeast of Tasmania, and Mutual Balance is our training program. But we're not going to talk about that now. We're going to look at the wind. As I listen to the wind rushing outside through the trees and the eaves of the home, we thought we'd go into a little bit of an explanation, a bit more about Chinese medicine and the purpose of providing some of the insights of this most incredible medicine and science, and how we look at health and disease in the human body and its relationship with its environment, including what the Chinese call heaven and earth. So wind is dynamic, it's expanding, it's spreading, it's also gentle and persevering. So we'll look in a moment about the relative to the seasons, but wind basically relates to spring. Its function is movement. It's connected on an intrinsic level to desire, and also all things new growth. And wind in its harmonious state is said to be gentle, and it's a force that nourishes all living things. So wind in heaven, and heaven is basically nature, but it creates the wood element on earth. Obviously the spring, as we just said, it connects specifically to the organs and meridians of the liver and gallbladder, although we can put the lungs and large intestine in there as well, which then generate the sour flavour, and then which provides nourishment to the tendons, from the sensory orifices, in particular the eyes, and it also provides flexibility of the mind and the emotions. And in regard to that, the actual poison of pathogenic wind is anger, frustration, and irritability. And the virtue of harmonious wind is love and compassion. And in the body, wind characteristic signs are symptoms that move. And also because it relates to spring and the green colour, anything that's green in the body, so a green complexion, green sticky mucus or any sorts of green mucus, even green bowel motions. So wind is called one of the 5 qi of heaven. And those are wind, heat, dampness, dryness, and cold. And they respectively relate to the seasons spring, summer, late summer, autumn, and winter, which means that those characteristics of wind are more common within the season that they arrive in. And the 5 qi are positive forces that nourish humanity. Wind is also one of what they call the 6 evil qi. And here we just add summer heat to that. So we've still got wind, cold, heat, summer heat, dryness, and dampness. And evil qi is the pathological environment that creates disease, both from excesses and deficiencies of the 5 heavenly qi in their correct timing. However, we also have pathological pathways that are both external and internal. So external wind. So obviously the wind from outside, and that penetrates through the skin and sensory orifices, and wind combines readily with the other 5 pathogenic qi. In particularly the back of the head and the neck are wind areas that are quite vulnerable to attack from external forces. So it's just be aware of that. If you notice heaviness in the head, headache back at the back of the head, stiffness in that area after you've been out working in the wind for a while. So the common symptoms: fear of wind, headache, fever, probably should put in there sweating, and the stiff neck and pain that moves. And this is basically your common cold. So wind attack is synonymous with common cold and viral types attack, as we understand in our Western medical systems. However, the Chinese attribute it to the wind. Now, wind that is accompanied by cold, we still have the above symptoms, but plus we might also have specifics where all the bones are aching and painful. And maybe it's a little bit difficult to get your breath in. And also potentially you might fear the cold as well. Sometimes when it's just fear of the wind, we have fluctuating. You know, we might be hot one minute, might be cold the next. But normally that fear of the wind in a common cold pattern usually involves a little bit of sweating that doesn't resolve the situation. Because that is one of the main pathways of expelling something that comes in from the outside, is to push it back out through the skin. So that's where herbal medicines and treatments that are geared towards manifesting sweat in the system are all clearing external wind. When we get heat, obviously we dry out a little bit, so we get thirsty. We also get inflammatory type sorts of conditions, conjunctivitis, styes, swelling, painful, sore eyes, ones that tear. And the nature of heat is to push upwards. So we also might have a red face, we might have a sore throat, we might have a cough that's got yellow to green mucus, etc. When winds combine with dampness, damp is heavy. It's like the dew in the morning, it drops to the ground. So anything that's associated to dampness is heaviness. Dampness is also dampness is fertile liquid. So the fluid metabolism in the body that is fertile is called healthy damp. Pathogenic damp is when that fluid metabolism starts to get interrupted. And when that happens, we usually get some form of swelling in some area of the body. And often the urination can get affected as well. So wind and damp sometimes brings up scanty urination, and also skin rashes. With the dry, constipation, skin, fingernails dry, thirsty, etc. And all forms of inflexibility, so tightness, stiffness, rigidity, and moving, all forms of moving symptoms such as cramps, tics, tremors, they're all associated to wind as well. And the emotion for wind and wood is anger. So from the perspective starting at irritability, moving through to anger and rage and violence is the stream of pattern that's associated to wind. And because wind is spring, it is generative, it is expanding, it is growing, it is making movements into the world to create something. Indecisiveness is also a sign of a system that's the wood element is not working sufficiently. Now, internal wind has a pattern, it's a chronic condition, so it takes a long time to develop, but its characteristics are sudden. An internal wind is generated by stagnation. So the wind, like I said, is gentle and nourishing. So if you can imagine a gentle wind over the paddocks, nice, touching the flowers and the insects and the trees, everything being graced by it. And then as that starts to develop and come into the city, and between those huge skyscrapers, the wind whips through those areas, isn't it? So that escalation of wind is manifested from a constriction of space. So when our circulation of our chi, our energy, our blood and our fluids get sluggish, there can be a tendency to create inflammation, first of all, and then that inflammation creates wind. So internal wind is caused by heat generated from stagnation, and typically the blood is dry. And this is a chronic condition, as I said. So common symptoms: sudden onset, so sudden dizziness, sudden headaches, chronic dizziness as well, but sometimes it just all of a sudden gets worse, isn't it? Headaches, in particular migraine, liver, gallbladder, very strongly connected to digestion. So the wood element has a tendency to over control the digestive system. So IBS, many symptoms of digestive discomfort and disorder can be related to problems between the wood element and the digestion. Insomnia, epilepsy, Parkinson's, Tourette's, cramps, seizures, convulsions, all wind symptoms. And on another level, an ant crawling feeling. If the strength of the liver meridian gets excessive and sluggish, it can manifest a feeling like little ants crawling over your body. Paralysis, yeah, tinnitus, high blood pressure, stroke. And I guess the thing about this is there are many, many signs and symptoms that are showing that you're developing chronic wind. Much better to treat it as early as possible. You don't really want to be waiting until you're starting to get a tremor and early signs of Parkinson's. You don't want to be getting extreme headaches or neck symptoms after a little bit of activity, and then 10, 15 years later, all of a sudden the stroke comes up. So internal wind is definitely worth addressing early. So external wind causes, like I said, wind easily penetrates the body when the immune defense systems of the body are weak. So in the Chinese, they say we have a defensive qi that circulates during the day just on the peripheral edge of the surface of the body, and it helps to harmonize us with the 5 qi of heaven. So your wind, cold, damp, dryness, whatever the other one was. What do I do? Wind, cold, damp, dryness, and heat. Yeah. So we relate that to the Western idea of our immune system. So the weaker we get, the more vulnerable we are to external attack, to things penetrating our body. And also the older and sicker we get, you could say, the more we realize that the external environment affects us. Like when we're young and our energy's full and vibrant and we're just carefree and running around having a good time, we don't tend to notice how these little things affect us. But certainly as we get more stuck and stagnant within our systems, it becomes very apparent how the environmental conditions change our physiology. Internal wind causes, lifestyle, nutrition, and emotion are the main areas. And we could also say failure to resolve external wind. So when you get a common cold, most people take a Panadol and keep going. They don't expel the wind from their system. They just reduce the inflammatory response within the system enough so that they can still continue their lifestyle. That's not such a smart idea. So normal exercise in a healthy human being at the right time of exercise, right time of year, generates perspiration, increased cardiovascular flow. That is a system that will help to resolve external wind. It will push it out of the system. But generally, the colder you get in climate, the less sweating days you get a year, and the more accumulation of external wind stays in the body, slowly working its way in, creating progressive disorders, disease. So lifestyle is basically an over or under activity. So we can be busy, so we never get to rest, and we never get to regenerate and store energy, or we can be, for whatever reason, no judgment at all, but we can be lazy, you could say, and underactive, and nothing moves internally. The chi and the blood don't circulate effectively, the fluids start to stagnate, and all of a sudden we're thick and chock-a-block with stuff inside, and then up come the symptoms. So main things to consider it with, particularly wind, is overeating. And especially if we overeat or eat large meals late in the day. And I do it as well. I'm not the perfect human being by any measure of the yardstick. I'm just sharing with you some ideas and things that may be a benefit on an educational basis and also a practical basis. But the liver and gallbladder meridians run from 11 p.m. at night till 3 a.m. in the morning. So the later we eat in the evening, the more the liver and gallbladder are going to spend their time assisting the body to break down food, and especially if we're inactive in bed. So if we got internal wind symptoms, it kind of suggests that we don't eat much late. We don't have a large meal later than an early afternoon, and then in the evening just very light stuff. not much food at all. Small meals as well is beneficial when we're dealing with all forms of chronic disorders. Rich, greasy, fatty foods, alcohol, smoking, coffee. Most people understand that these days, just to reduce it as much as possible. And also the excess of spicy foods, because the nature of wind, which is generated from heat, is to rush upwards. And what's the top of our body? Well, our head, yeah, and our brain. And if it's constantly being pushed, that means the normal circulation that comes from the chest into the head and back into the chest and upper back again gets obstructed. So the head stays full. Alzheimer's, all forms of brain disorders, neurological disorders can stem from a poor circulation through the neck and the head. Now, why was I saying that? I lost the thread of how I actually got started on that, but oh yeah, the spicy foods. So the nature of spice is the same nature as spring. So it has an upward and expanding energy. So all spicy foods, by a majority of them, cloves is a difference there, because cloves has a tendency to go down, and cloves, excuse my pommy Australian accent, but most spicy foods dry and push up. Well, they actually do create moisture as well, but that's a bit more complicated to go into. But generally, they're drying and lifting and expanding, which is the pattern of where the wind is going anyway. So you don't want to encourage that pattern too much. So just be careful with too many spices. On an emotional level, chronic stress. We know now that chronic stress is endemic, and it's built into human consciousness. So we have developed an approach and a societal way of living that is chronic stress states even before we're born. So the embryo through the gestation period is already pre-programmed with a genetic imprint of stress. So the common signs are we have repressed and suppressed anger. Anger is a vital force that says, no, this is a boundary, you've gone too far, that's enough, which is absolutely essential. However, due to the excessive anger and violence, you could say, within human consciousness, we've created the opposite, which is non-violence. So we've moved towards an image of what we think is the correct way to be, which is to be calm, to be nice, to be kind, to be peaceful, to be caring, affectionate, expressive, in a kind, gentle, peaceful way, of course. So anything that doesn't fit into that, we suppress it. And of course, this is passed on to our children. So normal expression of a normal boundary forming emotion, such as anger, will lead to basically internal liver wind eventually. And the signs of that we can see is impatience, irritability, impulsiveness, explosive behavior. When it's more suppressed and inside, we can see resentment and stubbornness come up. Violence, rudeness, fluctuating moods that just come in and out of nowhere, this sudden change stuff again. Mania, depression, anxiety, nervousness, nightmares, and the list goes on and on. So what can you do? Well, for external wind, as much as possible, and if you work outside on the farm, in any outside work at all, of course, you're quite difficult to restrict from the wind. But the main thing is to dress warmly. Yeah, it makes a sense in the cold weather. Dress warmly, particularly a scarf and a hat to protect the neck and the back of the head. And if possible, avoid sweating, because as soon as you sweat, pores are open, and then anything external easily penetrates into that space and blocks it up. If you are out in the wind and you get a sudden pain symptoms come up, aching in the joints, aching neck, headache, sore throat, etc., you might want to take a hot bath and add some eucalyptus and peppermint essential oils. Just be a little bit careful with them. when your skin starts to get all little bitey, tingly bits, you could say that the oil on the surface of the bath is quite strong, and you might just want to circulate the water a bit and be careful around your genitals as well. But yeah, a good healthy dose of eucalyptus and peppermint. Stay in the bath, get quite warm. When you get out, wrap yourself up in a sheet and sit by a fire or a heater, and just allow yourself to perspire a little bit. Yeah, I know I say that you're not supposed to sweat in winter, and to protect and avoid sweating, but if you're inside by a fire and you're using it as a therapeutic response, if you can get a little bit of sweat out, you'll push the wind back out through the skin, and you should be fine the next day. Internal winds, much more complicated, because it depends on how the wood element is interacting with the other 4 elements. Depends on age, genealogy, lots of different things, and it's probably better to talk about that sort of advice with a professional, so that they can really tune into your personal and unique expression of that, and provide remedies to help you. If you want to contact in at all, we do online consultations, Chinese medicine online, for people that are not in the northeast of Tassie. The Integral Freedom Simply Book Me is just a booking page, but it's got quite a bit of nice info on there. You can do that. You can join our Facebook groups, Derby Community Acupuncture or Chinese Medicine Online. Probably if you're not in Northeast Tas, probably best to go to Chinese Medicine Online because we share the same content. But if you're in Northeast Tassie, then the Community Acupuncture one is better for you. You can also email me at integralfreedom at gmail.com, or you can ring me on 0439672186. That is the worst method of contact, as I live in an area where the phone reception is lousy. So even if you're lucky enough to get through on the phone, it will probably be a bit type conversation. If anyone's had a poor internet connection, will know very well. Okay, have a wonderful windy weekend, and I look forward to chatting with you in the not distant future.